So we're continuing in the Mishnah. It told us that you have to shecht the karbonos on the north side. And as we'll see, the pasuk is written by a carbon oila, and we learn chatas from oila as well. So the obvious question the Gemara is going to ask on the Mishnah is: so how come the very first example the Mishnah gives for doing it on the right side is carbon is the Par Yom Kippurim, when in fact we learn everything from oila. So first bring your primary source, tell us that oila has to be in the north, and then you work your way through. Says the Gemara, Mechdi, Sofin Ba'oila Ksiv. Where do you find the law of shechting on the right side of the mizbech by a carbon oila? So Nishna oila b'reisha. Why doesn't the Mishnah just start with carbon oila? Says the Gemara, why start with the Parsha Yom Kippurim? Says the Gemara, I did the Osam B'Drosha, because it's not clearly written in the Torah by a chatas. It just says that the chatas should be done in the same place as the oila. So it's not really clear, it's more implicit than explicit. And therefore, Chaviv Alei, the Mishnah decided it likes that better. Says the Gemara, okay, you like to talk about chatas, but the pasuk that tells us that a chatas should be slaughtered the same place as an oila is talking about an ordinary chatas. Why jump straight to a chatas of Yom Kippur, which is only once a year? Says the Gemara, because the chatas of Yom Kippur is special as well, because not only did you sprinkle the mizbech and everything else, you sprinkled the inner mizbech, but more than that, you sprinkled inside the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So I didn't lefnim, because you brought the blood inside, chaviv. Therefore, the Talmud of the Mishnah likes that even better. Okay, says the Gemara, where do you find they have to do on the north side? By carbon oil, because it says in the pasuk, "V'shachat oisa," you should shecht the carbon oil al yedech hamizbech, on the side of the mizbech, to find the north side. Yeah, but that's where you learn it from. But l'chayda ashkan ben tzayin, that pasuk it says v'im min atzayin, talking about sheep. Ben bokim non haino, if you bring, let's say, cattle, that you also have to do it on the north side. So now the Gemara is going to tell us as follows: you have two psukim, and you have a conjunctive and in between the two psukim. So the first pasuk is called the Maila, and the second pasuk is called the Mata. And it's no question that if it says and, anything that follows the and obviously is a continuation of what's written before the and. But what about the pasuk written before the and? Do you learn laws out from that which is written post the and, or not? In other words, does the Elyon learn from the Tachten as well, or just the Tachten, or we just go with the flow, whatever's written afterwards, you learn from the former, but you don't learn the former from the after. So the Gemara says, it says its first pasuk is talking about cattle, that's the former, that's the Elyon. The second pasuk talks about sheep, that's the Tachten. So the Gemara says, we are going to learn laws from the Tachten and carry it over to the Elyon. It says the pasuk, the im min atzayin, and from the sheep. That's a continuation, and therefore we are going to learn laws from the second pasuk and bring it forward to the first pasuk. The Yilmoid Elyon Metachten. We're going to learn it from the Tachten to the Elyon. Says the Gemara, this only makes sense for Mandam and Melamdin, that you can do that. Mandam and Melamdin, the one who says no, whenever it says and, it's only what's written afterwards, you learn from what's written before, but not the other way around. Ma'ikil mem, what are you going to say then? Where do we find that there's such an argument? So as follows. We have one pasuk where it says that if you use something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, you're stealing. And they have a special term for it called me'il. If you did it inadvertently, b'shayga, you didn't realize it, so then the law says that you pay whatever it was. You also have to pay a penalty of a quarter, which we call a fifth. And then you also have to bring a carbon asham known as asham me'ilis. If you did it on purpose, you get death. But according to Rebbe, it's not, you don't get chorus, you get misa v'dei shemayim. And according to the Tanakama, you only get a lav. Okay, so we're going to have an interesting machlekes from Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim regarding an asham toli. Now, what's an asham toli? An asham toli is you ate, let's say, a piece of fats, and you're not sure if it's chaylev or shuman. You don't know if it was kosher or not kosher. So it's an asham toli. It's a suspended asham. Suspended asham means that it's not an atonement, but at least the punishment will be suspended. We're not going to punish you. But if you ever discover what actually happened, turned out to be was treif, you have to bring a carbon chatas. That's called an asham tali. And the first pasuk says Asham Me'ilas, and the next pasuk says Asham Toli. And the question is, by an Asham Toli, do you bring an Asham Toli by a Me'ilah? In other words, you use something. Later on, you found out there's a possibility that belonged to Hegdish. You don't know. Was it Hegdish? Was not Hegdish? Normally, you bring Asham Toli. Is there a case of Asham Toli when it comes to something that by the case of Me'ilah? And there's an argument, and we're going to try to interpret the basis for that argument. Says the Gemara Tanya, we learned, it says in the pasuk, the im nefesh, if somebody committed a sin, and he doesn't know, that's called an asham toli. And it says and. So the im nefesh, the pasuk prior to that talks about me'ilah. So what does it mean? And there's nothing that Asham Toli will learn from Me'ilah, but there is something that Me'ilah will learn from Asham Toli, and that is that in the case of Me'ilah, we stole from Hegdish, you're not sure if he did or he didn't, you should bring an Asham Toli, which means that you will learn from the second pasuk, you bring it forward to the first pasuk. You bring from the Tachton to the Elyon. So the Gemara, now what's going on here? What's the argument? My lab, how come this argument? Marsava, one opinion says the maiden. We learn out. Umarsav, another opinion says Ein Lemeidim. Now what? That you don't carry forward from the second pasuk to the first pasuk. That's the argument. So the Gemara's question is, according to the one who says that you do not carry from the second to the first, how do you know that you shech a carbon oila, which is cattle? How do you know that you also do it on the north side? Amar Papa says you got it all wrong. Kuli Amal Maiden. Everyone holds you learn both ways. You can take the second pasuk and bring it forward to the first pasuk. Shchita b'tzafon, because it says and the sheep, and the same thing applies to cattle. So what's going on here? What's the argument by Mila? Behind it, you know what the smart Rabban is? Because we have a Gzeira Shava. We have a Gzeira Shava. It says the word mitzvahs by a generic chatas, and you have the word mitzvahs by Asham Toli. And therefore, when do you bring a karma chatas? If you did it deliberately, you get kars. So Asham Toli, you have the word mitzvahs to teach you. When do you bring an Asham Toli? Only for those averas that if you did it deliberately, you get a curse. But by stealing from the Beis Hamikdash, even according to Rebbe, you don't get curse. You only get misa b'dei shamayim. So therefore, to teach you, says the Rabbanon, that there's no Asham Toli by Me'ilah, by stealing, because it's different than the normal chatas, because there's no punishment of curse. How do I know that from Gzeira Shava? My time, and by the general chatas, because most chatois are to do with fats, treif, mitzvahs. Look over there, you get chorus if you did deliberately. And here, if you deliberately get chatas. Nu, Rabbi Akiva, housing a deal, there's a Gzeira Shava that says that you do not bring an Asham Toli for Me'ilah. He says, no, you're right, there's a Gzeira Shava, but I'm using it for another law altogether, that I'm limiting the chatas. There's another type of chatas we learned in Masechta Shavuos, which is a floating chatas. Depending on your wealth, that's the kind of carbon, an animal, a bird, flower offering. So it comes to tell you there's no Asham Toli by a floating chatas. But a fixed chatas, all of them is an Asham Toli. And the same thing by Asham Me'ilas you bring. Only fixed Avkan Bekvu. Lafuki, to exclude chatas, the Tumas Mikdash V'Kadosh, or chatas of somebody who's tummy entered the base of Mikdash. The oila the yaidu, that's a floating chatas, and you therefore that there's no asham. If you didn't know if you were, a something, if you were telling you're not sure, you don't bring asham tali. So the Gemara Rabbanon, how they can respond to that? So Rabbi Kiva acknowledges the Gzeira Shava, but he uses it for another law. Says Rabbanon, you're right, we agree with you, but ein Gzeira Shava l'machsa. You can't limit the Gzeira Shava. Once you have a Gzeira Shava, once the two laws are linked to each other, then all the laws carry over. Rabbi Kiva, Nami, what's Rabbi Kiva going to respond? The Chacham right. You can't just learn halfway. So you're right. But here we have a different argument altogether. Rabbi Kiva says, you're right, there's a Gzeira Shava, but I have a hekesh. Rabbi Kiva says, the im nefesh ksiv, vav, moisev al yirushin, you have a hekesh, you have a vav. And the vav therefore tells you that the Asham Toli gets carried forward to the Asham Me'ilas, and you bring an Asham by an Asham Me'ilas. It says the im nefesh. There's a hekesh. So what's Rabban's answer going to be? But the Gzeira Shava contradicts the hegdish. So what's going on here? What's the argument? So it could be lema b'hakmi. This is the argument. Rabbi Kiva says I have a contradiction here between a Gzeira Shava mitzvahs that there's no asham, and I have totally by Mila, but I have a hekesh that says there is, because you do take the second pasuk and bring it forward. So hekesh is stronger. And Marsha with Chacham holds Gzer Shavah. If not, the Gzer Shavah cancels the hekesh. So do you want to learn now? Kulyam, everyone agrees hekesh odid. Everyone agrees that hekesh is better. The truth of the matter is, of course, the Gzer Shavah is better. But hekesh, if you can reconcile the Gzer Shavah and the hekesh, let's do that. So here we can reconcile how. Is Va'amler Rabbanan say Tacht and Hudagamelian. Rabbanan say that over here the hekesh still stands, but you got it wrong. You think that we're going to learn the first pasuk from the second. We're going to learn stealing from the base of Migdash from Asham Toli. No, the other way around. We're going to learn Asham Toli from the base of Migdash, and that's the purpose of the Hegdish. And what exactly are we learning? The value of the animal. A normal chatas has no value. You can bring the cheapest animal on the market. When it comes to an asham ilas, the Torah says pay an animal a minimum. The value of the animal is a minimum of 2 shkalim. Comes to teach you the same thing applies to asham toli. The value has to be a minimum of 2 shkalim. Because you have to learn 2 shkalim. Because you would think that you think very simple. What's an asham toli? It keeps everything in abeyance, but it's not a form of atonement. So you would have thought, and if I find out I committed a veda, I got to bring a chatas. What's the value of a karma chatas? Nothing. So how can a suffix, a doubt, be more valuable than if you didn't? If you know for sure you did an avera, it doesn't have to have value. It could be a cent. But if I don't know if I did an avera, I got to pay 2 shkolim. Doesn't make sense. So therefore, we need the hekesh to tell you that no, we still need to pay 2 shkolim even by an osham toli. And the logic is, Rabbeinu Yonah says in Brachos, the logic is very simple. If a person committed a sin and they know they sinned, one day they feel guilty. And therefore, the value of the animal is not important. The fact that you bring an animal is good enough. But when it comes to an Asham Torah, which means you don't even know you didn't have Veda, it's natural for people to convince themselves that, I probably didn't do anything wrong. So you won't really feel guilty and you'll never do tshuva. And the most important part of a korban is the tshuva part of it. The animal you bring it, you have to imagine that this would happen to you, but it's the tshuva part of it. By making you pay a substantial amount of money, you realize it's serious, and that will force you to do tshuva. So we shouldn't say lo yesek. I would have thought how can Osham Torah be stricter than a korban chatas? Mabad chatas bazdanka could be even a sixth of a dinner, no value. Avsveike Osham bardanka also no value. Rabbi Akiva, okay. So Rabbi Akiva, therefore, who says that he uses the Hegesh to teach you that there is an Osham Masham Me'ilos. Where does he learn out that a korban Osham totally has to have value? Rabbi Akiva Hasvar, how does he know? He learns it out from another passage where it says Zois Toidas Osham. These are the laws of Osham to tell you that all the laws are uniform across the board. All the Shamas are exactly the same. And once you know that a korban Osham Milah has to be worth 2 shkalim, then all Hashamas, including Osham Toli, 2 shkalim. Saying that only makes sense. Man, these the one who agrees with this concept of Toidas. But man, the less Toidas, the one who doesn't agree with the concept of Toidas, how does he know that even an Osham Toli has to be worth 2 shkalim? So he's right. We know where he learns it from. He learns it from be'erkecha. It says there that the word be'erkecha by Sham Me'ilas it says be'erkecha, and by Gzelis it says erkecha, and it says also erkecha by Asham Tali. That the value of. So therefore we make a Gzer Shava to teach you that they all have the same value. So that only makes sense by all of these Ashamas. Hey, let's see erkecha. But Asham Shivcha Charufa, this Shivcha Charufa, who's married, and the guy has relations with her, where you bring a korban Asham, Sham Shivcha Charufa, and she's Chatzi Eved, Chatz B'Chorin, half free, half slave. But like Kasev Erkecha doesn't say the word Be'erkecha there. How do you know that the Asham you bring there, the value? Ma'ikol Memer. So we say you're right. There's another Gzer Shava, Gomba. We learn out. It says the word ram. It says you should be forgiven with Eil HaOsham. You should be forgiven. And it says also regarding the Shivcha Charufa, you should bring Eil Osham. So we learn out the value. The value. Says the Gemara, okay. Chatas min nolon de ba'itzofa. We established that a korban oile requires the north side. It says in the pasuk. And we said by sheep, by cattle, it applies everywhere. Now, how you know chatas? You have to shech on the north side. It says, the shochet is a chatas b'kayma oila. Where should you slaughter the chatas? Where the oil is. So ashkano we know when there's shchita. Kabbalah Minolan, how do you know receiving the blood? Also, the blood has to be received in a keli in the north side, on the right side of the Mizbeach. When it says a posik, the lokach hakoyin midam achatas, it says the koyin should take from the dam achatas. It says first the shachat, and then it says you should take. It's a continuation. And therefore we say, what? And where should you take it? In the same place where you shachted. So the Gemara, and the lokach means receiving the blood, as we learned before. Says the Gemara, and we learn actually from Moshe Rabbeinu, you receive the blood by Har Sinai, receive the blood from the Kabbalah. It says by Yikach Moshe Chatidam. So we know the word by Yikach means receiving the blood. Okay, what about the Kohen himself? The Kohen receiving it, can he stand on the other side of the divide, on the left side, and just have his hand sticking out, stretched out, and receiving the blood on the right side? I know he personally has to be positioned on the right side. On Makro, it says a posik, the lokach loy. It says a posik. It says the lokach hakoyin. So we darshan the lokach is as if it says loy yikach. The word velokach, it says lokach koyin. We take the word koyin, we transpose it and put it in the front, hakoyin. And velokach is, we say, veloy kach. He says, take him. As if to say, take the koyin himself. The koyin himself has to be brought to the right side. Okay, we know that in Kutch, if it says it once, it means that's how it should be. But if you didn't follow through, it's still all right. Is la'akim, and how you know that if you don't follow through, it's a problem. It says Gemara Korach Chinik. There's another pasuk where it says it repeats it elsewhere. It says in the pasuk v'shachat, you should place your hand on the goat of the nasi if he committed aveda. Think he paskin for himself. He ruled that it's all right. Turned out to be he wasn't. He has to bring a seir nasi, and there it says that he should place his hand on the head of the seir and he should shecht it in the same place as shech the oila. Now, it's a regular chatas. Why do you have to repeat it? It's a repetition to teach you that if you don't follow through, you're not yetzer. It's disqualified. The time we learned Heichen Oila, we learned it's up in the north. Avzev it's up. So we know in the north. So therefore, that's how we know it's action. Why do I need this pasuk to tell me to shech in the north? We know generally all chatois are done in the north. The chimi cannot alone from here we learn now. But it says it already says that generally speaking, all the chatois should be done in the same place as shech oila. It's superfluous. To tell you where. Come and tell you to disqualify. It's repetitive to tell you that if you don't do it on the north side, it's disqualified. So how do you know? Maybe it's coming to teach you something else. You're telling me it's coming to tell you that it's disqualified if you don't do the north. If you look in the wording closely, it says by the goat of a nazir, it says v'shachat oisoi. You should shecht it. That this goat has to be shechted on the north side, but the other goats, like the seir you do on Yom Kippur, the goat that you do, chatas you do on Yom Tov, and the goat that you do for Avodah Zarah, those three goats maybe don't have to be in the north side. It says oisoi. It's not superfluous at all. It's coming to teach you a new halacha. This is the only goat that has to be done on the north side. Maybe that's what it's coming to teach you. Tamalaymer, therefore it says, he says you should place your hand on the head of the chatas. The shachat es a chatas, you should shech the chatas b'mekoim ha'oila. It says here you should place the hand on the chatas and you should shech the chatas in the place of the oila. Zeh says another pasuk. Zeh bona av. This is talking about a yachid, an individual who brings the korban chatas, and it says again, bring it with the oila. It's totally extra. Zeh bona av l'chol chatos yetu etzafim. Here it comes to tell you that all chatos have to be in the north. Why does it say by a nazir to tell you by a nasi to tell you that it has to be that it's ma'akiv? So okay, ashkechan seir nasi. So we know that the goat of a nasi it is ma'akiv. Beilin mitzvah ma'akiv. You have to do it on the north side, and if you don't do it, it's ma'akiv. Shar chatois nami ashkechan. All other chatois we know the mitzvah. You brought a pasuk. All other chatois you have to do it in the north side. Where's the extra one for all the other ones? The extra one here is only regarding a goat. How do you know all other chatois it's ma'akiv? So we answer the chsiv because we have the same pasuk twice. by the generic chattas, one by a goat and one by a lamb. One is to tell you should do it, and the other one is to tell you that repeating that if you don't do it, it's disqualified. B'kizba uksibis ira, and it says that you should shecht it where the oil is. And why do you need both the goat and the lamb? Hello, so Gemara says fine. Okay, so from here you learn out that all chatois you have to do on the north side, and if you don't do it, disqualified. So why does it say oisoi? It says by the goat of a nasi, v'shachat oisoi. You should shecht it, and not what? What are we trying to exclude? And the Gemara will try 4 attempts at telling us what we're trying to exclude, that something else does not have to be on the north side. That you would have thought it would be, and it should be, I'm telling you it doesn't. So let's go through it. The first we say, like Tanya, we learned that we know the first chatois of an individual that was brought was Nachshon at the Chanukas HaMizbech. But that carbon chatas he brought was merely for the dedication of the base of the Mizbech and the Mishkan, nothing to do with kapara. But at the end of the day, its namesake is chatas. So we would have thought perhaps because it's a chatas, you should also have to shecht on the north side. So it says, no, you say this goat chatas, but not nachshon. So we need a tanya but sorry, not the goat of nachshon. Now, why would you think the goat of nachshon is a different chatas? It's not atonement. Why would you think it has to be on the north side? So Gemara explains why we would have thought so. The time we learned, it said the pasuk, he says you should place your hand on the head of the soyer. And what do you mean? And you should place your hand on the head of the soyer. Because why do you have to say the head of the soyer? By the goat of the nasi, it says the head of the soyer. She just said al roishay. We're talking about the goat. Just say and place your hand on the goat. And why is it the head of the soyer? To tell you, there's another soyer that you also have to place your hand on. And what's that? The goat of Nachshon. And as Gemara will explain, since when it comes to putting your hand, pressing down on the animal, we say that Nachshon's chatas are similar to everybody else's. So we would have thought the same thing applies also to the law of shechting on the north side. Shimon says, no, the Nachshon carbon is totally different, nothing to do with smicha, nothing. You know when you need a pasuk to tell you samach yadai, that you should also place your hand on the goat of avodah zarah. The rabbi seide avodah gechadim l'smicha. The goat of avodah zarah requires smicha, because the Torah doesn't delineate what to do with the goat. When the Bezdin ruled you permitted to do avodah zarah, they realized they made a mistake. We bring us 2 kavanas. One of them is a goat of a chatas, and the Torah doesn't say what to do with it. So we learn from the samach do smicha. So Gemara explains now. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Salve, our thought, since according to Rabbi Yehuda, Nachshon's carbon needs smicha, Hoyle Israbu smicha, Israbu nami l'tzafon, maybe also it has to be done on the north side. Kamashla, it doesn't. Masker Rabbi said it doesn't make sense. Hanicha, first of all, Hanicha Rabbi Yehuda. This only makes sense according to Rabbi Yehuda that wants to compare the carbon of Nachshon with the ordinary carbon. But Rabbi Shimon says that the carbon of Nachshon is totally unrelated. So according to him, what do you need the word oisai by go to exclude Nachshon? What for? Number one. And furthermore, Mazuta said, furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda, even Rabbi Yehuda thinks any better. You're only bothered by Rabbi Shimon. Even Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make sense. L'maydis Rabbi is Rabbi, u'maydin lo is Rabbi, lo is Rabbi. The Torah says that Nachshon's carbon is similar to a regular chatas, that you have to place your hand. That's all. On what basis do we have to now to expand and say, let's also say shechting on the north side? Why? There's no basis for it. Why would you think you should, that you have to eliminate it? Tell me, had not been for the word oisei to exclude the, I would have thought teisei binyanav. I would have thought, well, it's similar to chatas. Maybe we should draw a parallel. If so, what I need a pasuk for smicha? Just say it's a chatas, draw parallels. Im came smicha gufa teisei binyanav. What smicha itself we should learn one from another. They're similar. You can tell me you can't learn a one-off carbon from other carbonas that happen, continuously. So that's why by smicha you need a pasuk. In that case, so therefore the same with the north side. Why would you think that you have to do the north side for Nachshon, that you need to eliminate that? So it goes back to exclude that. So it goes back to the original question. Why does it say oisei by the goat of a nasi? What are we trying to exclude? So I'll tell you what. The kohen himself, the animal has to be on the north side. What about the person shechting the animal? Does he also have to be on the north side? And therefore it says no, he doesn't have to be. And that's what you need oisei. Oisei, the animal should be on the north side, and not the kohen. So the Gemara of Eloisa with Tzafan, The ain't sheichid b'tzafim. The sheichid does not have to stand on the north side. Says the Gemara, you're right, but this is not the source for it. We learn it from elsewhere. Sheichid mit Rav Achi nafki. We learn elsewhere from Rav Achi. The Tanya we learn, Rav Achi said, it says, V'shochat, by a carbon oil it says, V'shochat oil, the very origin of this din of shechting on the north side. It says there, V'shochat oil soy, shecht it, the animal, al yerech ha-mizbech ha-tzafon, on the side of the mizbech, on the north side. We're talking about the animal. Why do you have to say oil soy there by carbon oil? What the fish metzinu? Because we find oimid b'tzafon u'mekabel b'tzafon. You have to shecht on the north side, and you have to receive the blood on the north side. If you receive the blood standing on the south side, and the keli of the blood was on the north side, is disqualified. You need to stand on the north side. So I would have thought shchita the same thing. I would have thought shchita the same thing applies. You have to be standing on the north side. Therefore, it says by carbon oil, oise b'tzafon. The ein ha-sheichid b'tzafon. The sheichid doesn't have to be tzafon. So we learn from oil itself. I don't need the oise by the goat of a nasi to tell me that. So what do you do with the oise? I'll tell you what. Oise b'tzafon. The ein ben oil b'tzafon. If you shecht a bird by a kohen, you shecht a bird malika using his thumbnail. You would have thought the kohen, has to use his thumbnail on the north side. So only animals and not the birds. That's what oise is. The Tanya we learned. I would have thought it should be a north, but it makes sense because it's even stricter than a regular animal. In what sense? When it comes to sheep, anybody can shech. Yet cover like safan. So the person shechting, we don't care, but we care about where you shech. Who can do malika with the thumbnail? Only a kohen. So if we're particular about who does it, surely we should be particular about where it's done. That's what we would have thought. Better to cover like kohen. Any should be on the side. That's what it says oisai, what? But not a bird. Says the Gemara, why? Why would you think a bird needs the north side? From a certain respect, an animal is more significant than a bird. And just because the Torah told us by an animal to do on the north side, we can't just on our own decide that the bird is the same thing. You can cover the keli. When it comes to a sheep, the Torah specifies you have to use a sakin and all that to shecht it. And on the other hand, when it comes to a bird, just use a fingernail. So who cares? It doesn't matter. You don't need a special utensil. Who said you need a special place? So what do you need oisei for? To exclude what? These kabbanas have to be on both sides. They ain't pesach b'tzafim, but current pesach doesn't have to be. Tani milet. I would have thought a current pesach should be done on both sides, but it didn't make sense. There's which is no fixed time. The oila you can bring any time of the day. There's no fixed time when you have to bring a carbon oila, and yet we're very particular where you do it. And we said north side Pesach. When it comes to Pesach, when it comes to a Pesach where we fix the time. When it comes to Pesach where we fix the time, because you have a window. Erev Pesach. After mincha, after the tomich, and bam, there's a fixed time until evening that you could do the Korban Pesach. So if we're so particular about the time, it makes sense that we should be particular about the place. Ain't the din shikla b'tzafim should be in the north. That's why you need oisai to tell you, but only here, not a Korban Pesach. Says Gemara, what are you talking about? Why would you even compare Pesach to the other kapanas? For example, oila. Oila shekain kola, the entire animal gets burnt on the mizbeach. That's why you're very particular about everything, including the north. Said Gemara, you're right. We weren't comparing it to Oila, but we were going to compare the Pesach to a Korban Chatas. Said Gemara, but even Korban Chatas. Mal Pesach Chatas became a Chaperes, a Chayal Kisa. A Chatas is a very powerful Korban. You committed a Vele, how you done it deliberately, you get Karis. B'Shegig, a Chatas wipes it away. A clean slate. Powerful. Maybe that's why it has to be done on the north side. Said Gemara, okay, you live from Asham. Asham is not very powerful, just a normal thing. Says the Gemara, but even Asham, why would you learn Pesach from Asham? That's Koche Kochim, that's Koche Kalin. Just because Koche Kochim have to be done in the north, what does that have to do with Korban Pesach? Oh, it's okay. What about Mikulun Nami? Let's say we learn from all three. The fact is that you have a Chatas and Asham and Oila, they're all done on the north side. Shekei Koche Kochim, but the fact that they all have a common denominator, they're Koche Kochim. So what does the Isaac come to teach and exclude what? The oisa, only the goat by Avodah Zarah, you do the north side, and not where. So the Gemara, will go back to the first answer, the second answer we gave, which is to exclude the kohen who does the shchita. He doesn't have to be standing on the north side. The kashalach, we asked the question with Rav Achia, we learned it from elsewhere from Rav Achia. You missed the point. You said, you know why? The purpose of the pasuk by the goat is not to tell you that the kohen doesn't have to be standing on the north side. The kohen can be on the south side and the left side. That we know from Rav Achia. It's the inference from that. Only by shchita, only shchita here, we don't care where the shaychit is standing. But when it comes to receiving the blood, has to be standing inside the base of English on the north side. So it's not so much what's explicit, what's implicit. It's not coming to exclude that the kohen doesn't have to be north, but he's coming to say the shaychit doesn't have to be in the north. But the one receiving the blood, bitzafin mekabel, has to be in the north. Says, you know what, didn't we just learn before on the other side of the page from another pasuk where it says hakoyin, it says koyin, it says v'lokach, and we took the word, it says v'lokach hakoyin, and we take the word koyin, we bring it forward, and we take the word v'lokach, and we swap around, we turn the letters around, loy kach, take the koyin. Is v'lokach, we learn from there that take the koyin himself and put him on the right side. So one answer, this brayso v'lokach lemashba, doesn't agree with that kind of a drush, it's too twisted. So you want to find. So we find from here that while then oil you have to share limits. Kabbalah receiving the blood nami limits. How do you know? We learned by Karba Chatos already. They have this extra psukim that I want that even by the evidence is disqualified. But by oila, where's the extra pasuk by oila to tell us that if you don't share to the north, it's disqualified? So the Gemara, simple kavuchemer. Ma chatas. Where do you learn that chatas? You have to do north side from oila, and yet ma keves. If you don't do it, it's disqualified. So oila shabo chatas mekoicha, oila, which is stronger because the chatas you learn from oila, ain't it in surely shema keves. If you don't do it on the north side, you disqualify the carbon. So the Gemara, maybe no, maybe chatas is stricter than oila. Malachat said before, chatas has the power to give you a clean slate, even though the aveda is so severe that you get chorus. Ravina said you missed the point of what he said. This is what he said. Where do you find a precedent that a secondary item should be more powerful than the primary item? The secondary item is chatas. The primary item is oila. By a chatas, you're telling me that if you don't do it in the north side, it's disqualified. And you're going to tell me by an oila it's still all right? How can the secondary chatas be stricter than the primary? How can the effect be stricter than the cause? So now the Gemara is going to ask. We'll have to go a little bit to the next page because it's the middle of it. There are a few precedents where you find the secondary is more significant than the primary. Why? I'll give you an example. I'll give you a few examples. Take, for example, Maisa Sheni. You bring the crop with you to Yerushalayim, and what happens if it becomes tummy in Yerushalayim? You redeem it. What happens? You redeemed it for money, and then you bring it to Yerushalayim, and you buy something with that money, and that food now becomes tummy. You cannot redeem it. So it's stricter, right? You cannot redeem it. But that's secondary. Here you see an example where a secondary item, the food you bought with the money that came from Maisa Sheni, is stricter than the Maisa Sheni itself, which the Maisa Sheni can redeem if it came tummy, and you can't redeem this. But the Maisa the Hunifta can be redeemed. Because the Maisa Sheni can't redeem it. Now we learn. Because if you bought something with money from my you can redeem it. And Rabbi Yehuda says you cover, bury it because you cannot redeem it. So we see that the second, at least according to Rabbi Yehuda, the secondary item is more strict than the primary. Rabbi says no, it's the opposite. You know why you cannot redeem it if you took money from Maisa Sheni? You exchange Maisa Sheni for money, then the money you bought food became tummy. You know why you can't redeem it? Because the kedusha is so weak, it's not transferable. The first generation, the actual Maisa Sheni, is such intense kedusha, it's transferable. So if it became tameh, you could transfer it to money. The second one is so weak that it's not transferable. So on the contrary, it proves our point that the secondary is much weaker than the primary. There, it's not strong enough to be able to transfer the kedusha. So okay, I'll give you another example. Very tamura. If you have an animal that's a carbon, and then you bring another animal, you put it side by side, and you say, I want the kedusha of the carbon to transfer to the other animal. You shouldn't do that. But if you did, they both become holy. So what happens if the original animal that you wanted to make carbon turned out to be have defects, major defects? A balmum. The law is it can't be a carbon, but it becomes holy. It's not kedushas haguf, it's kedushas damin. The value becomes holy. So therefore, what you do is you can, you redeem it, and you can do whatever you want with the animal, the original animal. But when it comes to Tamura, if the second animal had a mum in it, it's holy. You have to wait till then when you redeem it, you can only use it for limited thing. You cannot share the wool. So we see that the second generation or the secondary is stricter than the primary. But it's Tamura, the original animal, you want to make a kodesh. If it's a flawed, it won't work if it's permanent flaws. But by Tamura, even though it's a balmum, it will become holy. Says the Gemara, very simple. Tamura, what are you doing by Tamura, the second animal? You're taking the first animal, which is holy, and you're transferring it to the second animal. It's the first animal that's holy that enables you to transfer the kedusha. But when it comes to the original animal, you want to make it holy. What are you doing? You're taking chulin and you want to make it kodesh. Because it's coming from chulin, you don't have the power to make it kodesh if it wasn't holy, if it's full of flaws, if it has mumin. So he says, Tamura mekoyach kachikasi. Where does Tamura come from? From another animal which is already sacred. But so therefore you can able to transfer that kedusha here. The original animal you want to make it holy, and it's a balmum, and you want to take something chulin and turn it into kachim. Can't. Okay, well another one more. How do you Pesach? What do I call Pesach? On Erev Pesach is the current Pesach. After Pesach it becomes a shlamim. And a shlamim has more requirements than a current Pesach. For example, you have to lean on it, you have to wave, and and you have to take the breast and give it a coin and wave it. So here we see that the secondary is stricter than the former, the primary. Hali Pesach, the who ain't tone smicha, you don't have to lean on it, or nesachim, libations, utrufas chazei v'shake, and to wave the breast and the shank bone. But if you turn it into a shlamim, the leftovers, tone smicha, you have to lean on it, unesachim, and the libations, utrufas chazei v'shake. So we see the secondary is stricter than the primary. Answer the Gemara, it's not secondary. But the rest of the year, it's no longer a Pesach. It is a shlamim. It becomes a primary shlamim. Pesach b'shai yimais shlamim is a primary. It's a shlamim, and therefore all the laws of shlamim go into it. It's no longer secondary. Or I'll give another reason why. How we know that an oila, not because of this whole word. I'll give you another answer. You know how you know that an oila, it's no good, it's qualified. Omakro, it says a pasuk that you should shech the chatas b'mekoyim ha'oila. What do you mean? Why say ha'oila with an extra hay? You say no. Why it says ha'oila? That it's an extra word to tell you that b'mekoyim hay, that it should be in the north side, and even the oila has to be in the north side. Stop over here. Continue with tomorrow. Have a good work.